Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. No matter where you're watching us from around the globe, I say thank you for allowing us into your homes, but most importantly, into your hearts. Ladies and gentlemen, by popular demand, Mr. Roland Lazenby is back with us as a guest on the Coach Scott Field Show. He was with us a couple weeks ago, and we were discussing him being an author and an educator, and had so much positive feedback that I was just so excited to have Roland come back and share with us some more stories and take off from where we discussed on the first show. So if you're watching us on the DBNA television network, I say thank you. You might be watching us on the Rewind Sports 60 or CSTV. A sincere thank you, and continue to support the shows, the network, the talent, and all the show sponsors. If you're listening to us in podcast form today, Roland and I say turn that knob up. Let's put that flavor in your ear. That's right. It's time to lace them up again for another edition of the Coach Scott Field Show. And again, Mr. Roland Lazenby is our special guest today. Roland, welcome back to the Coach Scott Field Show, my friend.
Thank you, Coach. It's great to be back.
Got a little different attire. We're into June already. The NBA
All
Finals
right.
are getting ready to get started. I'm rocking the pineapples today. I don't know if Tex Winter would approve, but it's awful comfortable out here in these warmer temperatures.
Tex was so focused on the basketball. I don't think he had a lot of disapproval for other facets.
Hey, but I'll tell you what, here's a guy into his 80s who would get out a weighted jump rope and skip that thing 200 times before practice just to show that he could still do it.
Yeah, he used to wow Shaq with the way he could toss around a medicine ball.
Isn't that something? Oh,
Yeah.
gosh. Great, great stories. The first show that we had you on, Roland, we talked about, some of your time around the Chicago Bulls, talked about Michael Jordan a little bit, the book that you have with Michael Jordan. We talked about Kobe, Phil Jackson, and the conversations were just very enlightening and very compelling. So I'm eager to kind of take off from where we left off last time. And I'm out here in Salt Lake City. So, of course, when you think of Salt Lake City, you think of Coach Sloan, who I got to observe and consult with for 2 years, to be around another Hall of Famer and just it was like a clinic every day. But what was your experiences like as you wrote the book Stockton to Malone covering the Utah Jazz?
Well, I'll tell you, I had done the history of the Bulls franchise, the 35th anniversary history, and it was a very large oral history. I went around and interviewed everyone, and Johnny Red Kerr, of course, was the Bulls' first coach back in '66 when they first got going. And Jerry Sloan would go on, of course, to become Mr. Chicago Bull. This was before Michael became Mr. Chicago Bull. And so one of the first questions I asked Johnny Red Kerr was, what was it like dealing with Jerry Sloan? And he said, well, when Jerry was a rookie, he was my roommate on the road in basketball with the old Bullets. And he said, he was so intense. We would play a game, and I'd had a few beers, and I'd go crawling into my bed, and he'd be sitting over there on his bed. You could see the cigarette coal glowing in the dark, and he was replaying. He was going over every play of the game in his head. He said, it is hard to imagine Jerry Sloan and the intensity he had as a young player. And of course, Pat Williams was the GM of the Bulls when Jerry was just coming into his own as the franchise star. And I don't think I've ever heard Pat Williams discuss anybody with the reverence that he did Jerry Sloan. Just huge fists for hands, how he and Norm Vandalier would just defend all of those people. The long-term Bulls employees who had been around would recall how Jerry Sloan there was nothing he wouldn't do to win. He played hurt. And that crowd in Chicago worshiped Jerry Sloan, and they worshiped him because he cared so much. It mattered. It really mattered to him.
Yeah, he's such, even in his, in his coaching days here with the Jazz, the tail was never going to wag the dog. Hard nosed, tough competitor. He was going to challenge you and hold you accountable if you were the highest paid man, on the roster, or if you were just an injured reserve guy. Your shirt better be tucked in. Your haircut better be nice. You better be clean shaven, and you better be ready to go to work because that's what he demanded of you.
He told me something once that I used every year that I coached basketball. He said, it's a simple game if you lay your heart on the line every night.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot.
It really is. And that's sort of the elusive element of genius.
Yeah,
When you're looking at the truly great players, it's the thing that separates them and the thing that almost instantly gets communicated to fans.
that's true.
It's an emotional thing, and here is this person who cares on a deeply personal level. It matters a lot. Whether
Yeah,
it's a Michael Jordan, a Kobe Bryant, a Jerry Sloan, a Jerry West, it doesn't matter. What
true.
matters is the depth of emotional connection to the task.
Yeah, see, I like that. And I remember you said something very poignant in our first interview. You talked about the human element. And, Jerry, was always in tune and had great rapport. And, he he wanted that respect, but he demanded the respect from you, but it wasn't something that was just given. He went out and led by example, and he did it on a daily basis. And that's something that, even with his interactions with the press on a daily basis, he would play that Midwestern, hey, I just want to get out there on my John Deere tractor, and I'm not a doctor, but, he's going to be tough and he's going to be ready to play. Just to hear how he would talk with the press and how he would deflect some of the pressure off of the players and team. And, he always held himself to the highest standards of accountability. And I really like that about him. And some people would call it old school, but yet it was so it was so refreshing to see someone who cared about his players so much and empowered his staff to go out there and allowed his staff to be coaches and not wallflowers. And it was so refreshing to see, Roland.
I call it the bullcrap quotient. Uh, you know, and I say this: coaches in general can be full of a lot of bullcrap, and not just basketball coaches, but a lot of coaches. They can talk a lot of crap. Jerry probably had the lowest bullcrap quotient in the history of the game.
That's a true statement. I like that. Yeah, if he said it, he meant it. He was the barking dog. He allowed Phil Johnson, who was his loyal assistant for
Right,
23 years, and then
right.
the years that I was with him, Ty Corbin worked with the big man. Scotty Layden worked with the guards. Jeff Hornacek was a part-time coach at that time, who was the shooting coach, and he just allowed those coaches to go out and coach. And if there was something going on that he didn't like, my gosh, she went out there and let you know that he expected more, demanded more. You need to slide over to the nail. You need to be talking. And again, it was so refreshing because, like you said, there was never fluff. It was just
Feedback
this.
was direct, to the point, and timely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And as you wrote the book, Stockton to Malone, which Hot Rod Hundley basically coined, Stockton to Malone, and there's a car dealership
Right,
here that's
right.
Stockton to Malone. What were some of the things that you took from Karl Malone, again, an amazing scorer, and you had John Stockton from Gonzaga, with the pick and roll and all the, variations of pick and roll. But what impact did you see Jerry Sloan having on those two, Hall of Fame players?
I, I really just was struck right away that Sloan competitive mindset was a perfect match for both Stockton and Malone. Now they were different guys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They really they had a fairly low bullcrap quotient in their own right, and so they just didn't truck with a lot of nonsense. And I kind of felt that was the story of those Jazz teams. They laid their hearts on the line. And it is a simple game, because if you can lay your heart on the line, you care on that deeper level we've been talking about, you're going to be able to live with the results. And John Stockton and Karl Malone both would talk about that. They really didn't sit around chewing their fingernails a lot and worrying. They knew that the answer was everything you had. And it was not only the answer to winning, it was the answer to when it was over too.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
And
go ahead.
those guys played that way, and they matched, and it wasn't always perfect. Nothing ever is, but they matched Jerry Sloan's competitive mindset. It seemed to me perfectly.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I can remember sitting there, and I believe we had the Denver Nuggets in the first round of the Western Conference playoffs that year, and they struggled on the road, but they had a win. And one of the guys in the press who covers the local Tribune here asked him, hey Jerry, Coach, how did you rest, and how you feel, you and the guys are going to be prepared playing at home. At that time, it was the Delta Center, but which is now Vivint Arena. And
Right.
Coach Sloan said something that really stood out to me. He said, he said, if you're prepared and you give it everything you've got, you can live with the results as long as you gave it everything you got. The only time you're going to have a problem with me is if I see you, didn't give it everything you had. And he goes, I can put my head on my pillow at night and rest well. He goes, I'm not one of those guys that stirs, 2 or 3 hours, afterwards, if I know we've done our job and prepared the players, with the game plan. And I thought, wow, after all those years of high level consistency and over 1,200 wins in the NBA, he's one of those guys that didn't stew on it. He just like, hey, you go, you play, you give it everything you got, you put your head down, you wake up the next day, and you prepare and give it 100% all over again. And I liked that.
Right. No, he always, to listen to a guy like Tim Hallam, who was the PR director for the Bulls forever. He saw all those people come through there, and there just wasn't anybody in Tim Hallam's mind that was a stand-up guy. When Jerry got fired as a coach in Chicago, he went to the press conference and they answered the questions, and was very appreciative of the opportunity. And he just said, I didn't get the job done. He didn't make a lot of excuses. And, he had played hurt so much. He had been such an item of inspiration to that crowd. The Bulls were always battling, and they could never get over the hump. But I mean, they would play well, get into the playoffs, but something or other would always happen. But the breakdown was never Jerry Sloan.
Yeah, I like that. And when you were spending time with both John Stockton and Karl Malone, was there anything that really stood out to you when you were spending time with Karl and learning about his Louisiana background and him truck driving in the summer and the way he took care of his body? Was there anything that really stood out with you that like, wow, this is why Karl is so special?
I really, and I'm big on context in my books.
Yeah,
Stockton to Malone is a thin volume, which is rare for me. But I kind of felt they were overlooked. They'd been in the finals, and I wanted to, they were just a competitive standard. And I was really documenting that mindset
yeah,
that came with carrying on that deeper level, hard on the floor, everything you had, and just the fact that that was the only thing that protected you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
from an eternity of second guessing, and those guys could live with it. They
Yeah.
they were not. Some are tortured by it.
Right. Right.
But you know, Jerry Sloan was a great stoic.
Ooh.
He was telling me his brother had died. I'm thinking he killed himself, but I'm not sure. Jerry was off a farm in Illinois.
McLeansboro. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And he had to go and play a game. He paid his respects to his brother, but he had a game to play, and he just, as I recall, now that's been 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Not the incident, but my conversations with him. But you don't run into a lot of people like Jerry Sloan.
True. So true. It's nice because, here in Salt Lake, they are, the community's team, the state's team. And, there's a statue of John Stockton and Karl Malone. And to me, it's a shame that as of today, there is still not a statue erected for Coach Sloan, because he was the epitome of what Utah Jazz, and all that common sense that went on for all those years while he was at the helm. When he stepped down and stepped away, a lot of that common sense went right out the door with him. And that's kind of sad. So I hope that, we get that statue erected out here outside of Vivint Smart Home Arena in the very near future, Roland.
Well, they need to make two copies. They need to have one for Chicago, and they need to have one for Utah,
Ooh,
because Jerry Sloan was the emotional underpinning of both of those franchises.
so true.
And both of those franchises badly needed everything that he was, and all of the emotional quotient he brought to the task. He was, if things mattered in Chicago or Utah, and both of those are pretty good basketball cultures. They're among the best in the country.
That's right.
And if they mattered to a pretty big degree, it's because he made them matter.
Yeah. Yeah. He may have been number 4 in the program, but he was number 1 in everybody's hearts when he put on that red and black.
Yeah, he was Mr. Chicago Bull.
That's
And,
right.
I think uh, Jordan inherited that. I mean, it's not that he inherited it, he was a great caretaker of that level of commitment, just as Magic Johnson and Kobe Bryant were great caretakers of the commitment of Jerry West to the game.
Ooh,
And so there are just a few like that. They're not a
that's
lot.
right. That's right. Eloquently spoken, Roland. Let's switch gears for a second. You also had Sudden Glory, talking about Tom Brady. And here everybody now is so enamored by, how well he takes care of his body, the longevity of his career, possibly the greatest to have ever played the position. What were some of the things that you took away from Tom Brady in those early years as you worked on his piece, with Sudden Glory?
Well, that was, I've written a fair amount of text for picture books. And that was a picture book published in the wake of that surprise performance by him in the Super Bowl, his first Super Bowl. And you know, if anybody's a throwback, and all these games change. Those guys like Johnny Unitas, Bart Starr, all those old school quarterbacks. The great Sammy Baugh, I once
Wow.
rode about, I don't know, I flew to Texas. And it seemed like I rode 10 hours into the Texas outback to spend a weekend with Sammy at his ranch there in Rotan, Texas.
Rotan,
At
Texas.
the
Wow.
foot of Double Mountain. If I'm not mistaken, it was in Rotan. It was at the foot of Double Mountain anyway. And it was there along the Brazos. And Sammy cussed like a boot, but all these guys uh, were were so tough, and they didn't have any rules to protect them. They took horrific beatings, and they were and Sammy Baugh, you know, played both ways. He not only led the league in passing, he led it in interceptions made, not thrown.
Mhm.
He was a fierce defensive back, and he averaged 1 year 50 yards a punt. And so he was on the field all the time. And you know, they were defensive backs and linebackers. They were making hits on the other team when Sammy played. But then you got into Unitas and that next generation of them.
Yeah, because you wrote about Unitas.
Yes, same thing as with
Yeah.
Tom Brady. And I've written several books on, you know, just cataloging the great quarterbacks, the competitive attitudes. And so it was good that they really were a different breed. And I hadn't thought much about it until this past season because I don't think I've ever seen such an amazingly over the top display of quarterbacking as we saw this past playoffs. And it really rolled right out of the regular season for, and I mean, everywhere you turn, the ability of this next generation to really step right into the moment.
Right. Yeah. You're
And
Patrick Mahomes and
right, and Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, he really
that's right.
Joe because he, you know, he's the guy that has taken a beating, and so in that sense, he's similar to the that old school stuff.
You,
It's
you
all
know,
special.
yeah.
I love basketball. I played football, played a year in college. And my injuries are mostly from football. So there are things about it I love, things about it from those injuries that I regret.
Yeah.
But probably in so many ways, basketball was my father's sport
Okay.
and his brothers. And you know, it's and Jerry West was his favorite player. My father was
Ooh.
one of the old two-handed set shooters back in the 30s out of
Okay.
southern West Virginia. So basketball's more of a personal thing, even though I never played much past eighth grade, you know. I
Yeah.
played up my whole life.
Yeah.
But I, you know, it just has always mattered.
Yeah.
And
You,
I've
you,
always loved the game. And in, even for some reason, I guess because of Tex, I would coach youth league stuff because they just didn't have enough coaches around.
oh,
But, but
especially coaches who are empowering the kids with the skills that they need to help them learn the fundamentals correctly.
right, I would never. I had been doing NBA work a while when I started coaching, and I had realized those coaches, they don't talk to grown men in any um, loose and disparaging fashion real often. And I said, I want to treat these young kids I coach like they're adult NBA players. And if I can do that, then, coaching is certainly not a business of perfect.
Yeah.
But but if I can do that, then I'll at least have fulfilled the fundamental.
Well, they were lucky to have you. And you mentioned something just a few minutes ago when we were talking about Tom Brady. You mentioned the competitive spirit. What was it other than competitive spirit that, take that great player to an elite level, which makes them a one percenter, to make them a Hall of Famer, or make them, in the debate of greatest of all time? Is it just the competitive spirit, or is there some other special sauce that you saw with their guys? Was it their preparation? Was it their, attention to detail? In your mind, what were those things that really set those elite players apart?
All of those, all of the above. But Tex Winter um, always cited the perfectionism in the great players. And it's true, whether you got a great musician, whatever kind of great performer, they're often pretty insane perfectionists. They
True.
can drive themselves crazy, as with Jerry West, and they can drive the people around them crazy, as with Michael Jordan. But
Yeah.
and it all goes back to me to caring on a deeper level.
Mm.
And so I just identify those guys. And I was always looking for them. I went out in 1996 for starting the 96 season. And that young generation was coming into the league. Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett had been there a year, Allen Iverson, all these different players, Ray Allen. And I went around and interviewed them and spent time watching them. And because Jordan was the standard for all of them. I
Mm.
remember I caught Ray Allen at a preseason game in Chicago, and they were all just in awe of Jordan. I mean, it was like they couldn't even look at him, it was, and I was standing out there in the hallway. I talked for about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes with Ray Allen, and he was so pumped up to go out there and be on the floor with Jordan for the first time.
Wow.
And that was a feeling that infused Kobe. It ended up being part of the Iverson narrative. It really was. Jordan was an important standard for that generation. For
Yeah, 'cause
all, and it was a global standard. It became you
so
know,
true.
I'm really tracing all the steps of the amazing NBA growth in the 80s around Larry Bird and Magic Johnson for this Magic Johnson biography I'm finishing up.
Oh,
And Jordan sort of completed the task that they launched. And the NBA, I don't think we realize how shabby the NBA was, not just in 1979, but even through the early 80s.
that's right. Well, think about it. NBA finals were tape delayed. So
Right.
until Larry and Magic, took that to another level, like you mentioned, with David Stern being the commissioner, Michael Jordan did take the game global with the 92 Dream Team, and players were more in awe to take pictures of them and then forgetting to compete against them. They're winning by, 35 or 45 a night. So I see what you're talking about in that proverbial passing of the torch, where you hear a Ray Allen talking about a Michael Jordan, and then you see Kobe striving so hard to attain knowledge from either a Tex Winter or a Phil Jackson or a trainer, Tim Grover, so he could put himself in that same, discussion as a, Michael Jordan. But where do you see that torch being passed with this generation of players who, the documentary Last Dance opened up a lot of guys' eyes to who Michael Jordan was, because there's a young generation other than YouTube followers who didn't really know who Michael Jordan was because they were just too young.
Yeah, I've been asked about that some, and it's, I don't I don't promote the perspective of writers as necessarily the best view of this,
Mm.
but I just sort of, my instincts tell me Jason Tatum
Oh,
is
he's Kobe-esque for sure.
he has his own thing going on. Obviously, he's been influenced by Kobe
Yeah,
and was open to that. But it's a generation that perhaps loves Kobe like the previous generation loved Jordan.
I agree.
But I'm just talking about the guy who has put in all the work, who is advanced at a young age, who seems to be able to step into the moment.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I don't know if the Celtics will beat this Warriors team. It'll be, I think I'll be really disappointed if it's not an absolutely great NBA final.
yeah, yeah.
But these two teams kind of get us beyond all the rules changes just because they play so hard. They're really good defensive teams.
Yes.
And their offense isn't, I mean, they're both prone to take some bad threes,
Yeah.
some ill-advised shots, but their offenses aren't a lot of gimmickry, or they're I think they would interest hardcore fans from any era.
See,
But
I like that.
but the NBA, was so poorly managed, and it was such a poor business well into the 1980s. And you don't really realize it really didn't, the NBA didn't have the power to enforce the integrity of the competition the way it should. They didn't have the financial power to take on the the millionaires that were coming into the game uh, on or about 1979, 80. And so there were challenges, and so I think David Stern, having witnessed all that while working as a lawyer for the league, really stepped in with a plan and an agenda. It's uh, the more I learn about it, the more in awe I am of the whole process.
Wow. Wow. I like that because even with Adam Silver now taking over after Commissioner Stern had passed away, you see where he's seems to really have the players' ear, and he will listen to the players. And I've seen him do some things, on behalf of the players. Whether some of that's political and some of the social movements and whatnot. I still think the NBA is in good hands and they're going in a good direction. Um, but
They
as
just
far
don't
as
know
these
where
fun,
they're going yet.
yeah,
The
true,
future is very hard to read.
yeah,
And it's very hard to read where they've really juiced up the game a lot.
yeah,
They've changed the game. They've juiced it up for the offense,
100% change the rules. Yes, yes, I
and,
agree.
and changed the time, as we've discussed, the timelines. And they've really played some games with the game.
Yeah,
And it's not clear yet where all of that is leading them. But they took the excuse that basketball wasn't being coached very well, wasn't being taught very well to the youth of America. And so they opted for a dumbed down, sort of sloppy version of it. Um, you see the good things creeping back into the game, the Bucks winning last year with the mid-range game, reestablishing that. Different things that are important. I don't know if we'll ever get back to any elements of traditional center play,
Mm,
but we may. I hope
yeah.
so.
But I see that as a lot of the European influence because some of those European players are so skilled and so cerebral that, they step out. You had your face up fours and now your face up fives where you're five out, no in, where there's spacing and more creativity offensively. Like you say, the rule changes definitely had an influence on that. But
And this was the
yeah,
revolution Magic Johnson started.
that's right. And you're writing about that. And I wanted to segue to that. So when you see on HBO, Winning Time and, Jerry Buss, buying the Lakers and, how, how Jerry West was depicted, there's some controversy with that. With what your work is with Magic Johnson, how different is it compared to what we saw where HBO dramatized it and put a lot of Hollywood into that Winning Time?
Well, the good news is the Lakers still won the
Yeah.
1980 championship.
Yeah.
Um, they, they're like a lot of TV shows that are written. I mean, they have to stop and look at the page, the written page of the script, and say, what are we going to do on this page to be entertaining and keep everybody watching?
Yeah.
That's their first question. Because if they don't answer that, they don't get to keep playing. And that's not necessarily how other people operate.
Yeah.
My training as a journalist and um, a pretend to be historian.
You're
And,
you're
and
you're being humble. You are definitely a historian of the games and the players.
what what I have to ask and what I want to know is what really happened.
Mm,
And so they had a little bit of concern with that. And, there's a theory I've heard it said often in discussing Winning Time that there are a lot of weak minds in the basketball fan base, and a lot of them really just don't care. They're just entertained by it.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that there's anything there that is going to harm the game.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything there um, that violates something sacred unless it is how they've treated and portrayed people.
True.
And it's cartoonish in that regard. It's just another form of entertainment.
Yeah.
I was upset because I had to go on a big on basketball breakdown, a show, a weekly show with a lot of exposure, and go over the whole thing. And I really grew tired of watching it because there was so much that they did just to mess around with everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was my job to explain what I thought was real and what wasn't.
They made your job challenging to say the least, right?
Yes, and it's tiresome.
Right.
I'd been working for 4 years on this Magic Johnson book,
That's
so
what I was going to ask you. As an educator and a journalist, when you think and you have a vision of a project, what is the timeline to do the job that you want to do to get it out there to do it justice?
well, I've never had this much time to do a project, and there are a variety of factors for that. Um, the Jordan book, I'd been working in and around the Bulls for, I spent a good 6 years with them. I wrote the franchise history. I did all these other projects. I did Blood on the Horns. And so I had a
Right.
great background. I still needed 3 years basically to
Wow.
do Michael Jordan, the life.
Yeah. Yeah. A very
I
successful
had
book.
it has been, yeah. It's in 20 some languages. It's been
Wow.
all over the globe. But that doesn't have a whole lot to do with me. That's Michael's. Uh,
Come on now.
uh, but I would say that because of all the different things, the pandemic, I've really lived with this like I've never uh, had to live with a project. And it's
Wow.
good. I mean, I want to use that phrase, working on a deeper level. Well, I've always worked on a pretty deep level, but this one is deeper than I've been before.
Oh,
So
I can't. When is your target date to possibly having it done, having it published, and when can
the
our viewers, go out and find those copies once they get in print?
the publisher's Macmillan,
Okay.
so they have it targeted for early fall of 2023.
Ooh,
Book's
that's
written.
exciting.
The book's written. I'm just going back and polishing it a bit here and there before I wrap it up this month.
Wow, congratulations. And more than 50 books that you have written. So now that you've written multiple books and you say polish it up, how many times have you edited, re-edited, revised? Because you're like, oh, I want to get this story right. And you being a perfectionist as a journalist, like the players are a perfectionist with their repetitions. What is that like for a Roland Lazenby?
Um, well, right now it's exhausting. I, and not just for me, but for my wife. Yesterday was our 47th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations. I
Well,
saw that on social media and I wanted to say something. So congratulations to you both.
thank you. She's been there through everything.
Wow.
And this one has gotten to her. She is ready for it to be done. I don't think,
Oh,
it's just, uh, it's just one of those things.
does she do a lot of proofreading for you? Do you get some feedback from
A
her?
little
Or?
bit. She will transcribe interview tapes. She
Wow.
does everything else in the world. She's a technology person. She's worked in technology as an educator.
Wow.
So she's always, all of this stuff involves a fair amount of technology.
Right.
And she's always been right there, pretty much working with me. So,
Wow. It's a collaboration. I love to hear that. Do you
yeah.
have any other newer projects that I mean, you probably have foundations of other works that you'd like to get started on, but not that you have to have breaking news, but are there other projects that you foresee getting started or you've already kind of
Well,
put the groundwork in?
I have a 2 book deal for Macmillan. We've looked at things for the second book. We've looked at not doing the second book. I just last week I met with some folks to talk about a project. I'm going to take a long break. I'll be 70 in August.
Wow. Wow.
And I'm lucky I'm in something that I can do. But for an awful lot of years, I've been a ghost in my own life.
Mm.
And so I'm eager to put the ghost away for a while and just live my life a little bit.
Good for you. You deserve that. My goodness. And
Well,
again,
everybody has to work hard,
yeah.
it's life. And I don't mind, but we'll see if I do another book. I don't know.
Is it real? I've been asked many times, hey, coach, you should write a book about, coaching in Saudi Arabia and Beirut, Lebanon, and over in China because of the cultural experiences, the basketball experiences, the religious, facets of it. And I just think, gosh, I've put ideas down and have started things, but is it real mentally draining and physically draining on an author like yourself who has invested so much time and energy into that?
Well, tonight I'm sitting here feeling physically drained and
Oh,
mentally drained. That's funny. This is the most religious book I've written, most spiritual, because
wow.
it really is about the spirituality of Magic Johnson's family. And I may have mentioned last time that I've traced him all the way back into slavery to his fourth great grandmother.
Wow.
And the
Wow.
presence, I discovered an amazing thing. The missionary Baptist, and his family was missionary Baptist. But the missionary Baptists in the heart of the South in the 1830s were anti slavery and were not shy about it. And so it's just sort of interesting to look at because basketball is a spiritual game that was invented at the School for Christian Workers.
There you
It,
go.
but it is a spiritual game, and it's not just a Christian spirituality. The game appeals to a lot of different people, a lot of different spiritualities. But this book probably, and um, just because of um, the great faith of Magic Johnson's parents,
Mm.
this
Mm.
book is a lot more rooted in faith and religion, and because it shaped basketball
Yeah.
in sort of interesting ways. It shaped culture too. But
Amen.
anyway, I, I'm a I, I'm a child of lukewarm Methodist. So my parents sang in the church choir for years. I did my turn teaching Sunday school for part of my life, but I'm not you know, I just more or less approach this as a journalist. I'm not writing with a faith agenda in my
Yeah.
book. I'm not. That's not my job. That's not what I'm seeking to do.
Yeah. You're
But if
you're
it's
just covering it
part
through their lens then.
right, but if it's part of the story, I don't want to look away from that either. I
Yeah.
I just want to report the story as I find it.
Yeah. And see that's the authenticity that makes it so compelling because people who pick up and read, they can connect to that character and understand, or maybe have instances in their life that, hey, I can relate to that as well.
Right, and I think that's probably of all the things that are misunderstood about race in this country. I think that's the simplest thing, but it's probably the most misunderstood thing of all about race.
Wow.
And
Wow.
uh, you know, um, I just find people are amazing and awesome in their everyday practices.
Right.
And, and when I find people like that, that's a good story.
You betcha. Oh, well, you've got me so excited. I can't wait for it to come out. So, I follow you on social media, of course. So I can't wait to hear about the release and get out to the local Barnes and Noble and scoop that one up, my friend.
Well, I'll make sure you're on the release list so you don't have to go to Barnes.
Oh, wow. I am honored. Thank you. Well, and of course,
Thank you.
you also teach, journalism.
I
And
did. I did for 21 years, but I haven't
wow,
taught really since 2013.
2013. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's been a while. I'll
What,
occasionally talk to a group of students, but I quit torturing students about 9 years ago.
oh, I bet that you impacted a lot of lives because you could share through your personal experiences of being a writer and things that worked for you and how to help them dodge landmines. And I can only imagine the wealth of knowledge and expertise that you were able to share with those young writers who were coming up. Are there any of
I
their
have a
projects that were
saying.
good?
I have a saying. I learn more from them than they learn from me. So
I like
it's
that.
a very different generation coming out of the turn of the century, and
Yeah.
with new media skills, and it was all brand. The whole world was brand new, and those kids were. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, that's neat, Roland. We've got like 4 minutes here. For the viewers out there and people who are interested in becoming writers, what advice would you have for those guys out there who want to be authors or want to be writers or want to be storytellers? What would you tell them?
Well, I always encourage my students to go talk to people, to be interviewers, develop interview skills, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction. Research is the heart of everything. You don't have to do any more than go to the local nursing home to find fascinating people from yesteryear with
Amen.
all kinds of things there. But I just think I was never a very good student. I read a lot, but I did not like sitting in a classroom all that much. But I loved getting out and engaging in active learning. And when I discovered journalism and the chance to talk to people and to let them become my instructors. And the
Oh,
other thing I would tell young writers is the best minds principle. I would always go around looking for the best minds to engage. And there's some fabulous minds out there in the world. Tex Winter was one of them that changed
oh,
my life. I've had numerous others, including George Mumford, the great George
oh.
Mumford, the mindfulness expert for the Bulls and later the Lakers with Phil Jackson's teams.
Had to be fascinating. Wow.
It still is. George is a dear personal friend of mine.
Wow.
Those kinds of things. I didn't have any journalism training, but I acquired it on the job. I was a police reporter. I had to write about very bad things,
Mm.
and so I learned. I made my way.
Yeah, yes, you did. Yes, you did. But just the way that you're able to take a story and put detail into that story to make people feel, what they're reading, and it takes them to another place. I think that's a true gift and a talent. And you've been able to bless a lot of people through your writings for years. That again, like you said, your Michael Jordan book in all these countries and all these different languages. I think it's a phenomenal gift that you're able to use as a platform to tell your stories and share with the world, my friend.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, Scott. Sometimes it works famously, sometimes not so famously. So, uh, but I'm happy that all these years I've been able to keep trying.
Wow. Well, you know what? Again, happy anniversary to you and your
Thank
lovely
you, Scott.
wife, and congratulations on this new Magic Johnson book that's going to come out, because you've carved a niche for yourself to take some of the best in the sports entertainment industry and share their journeys through the written word, or like you said, even through photo documentation.
Right.
They've been great gifts.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Thank you
So,
very much.
ladies and gentlemen, again, this is the coach, Scott Fields, and blessed and honored to have award winning author Roland Lazenby to share with us again, his knowledge, his experience, his expertise. And I'm a better version of myself because I'm trying to learn from you so I can be better at what I
Well,
do
we
and
learn
how I
from each
communicate.
other. We learn from each other. That's how that works. That's the
Oh,
wonderful thing about it.
well, I think I was on the winning side of this conversation for sure.
Oh, I don't know that. We'll have to look at the tape because it easily goes the other way too.
Oh,
It's fun because with your background, you're able to go to certain points. I was just very thankful to be able to spend the evening talking a lot about Jerry Sloan.
well, I feel blessed and honored, and I know our viewers and listeners will definitely be inspired. And I hope that there's writers out there who have listened to your journey and your story and feel empowered and inspired to be, the next Roland Lazenby. Let's see who will take that proverbial torch from you and put 50 books out there to the world.
Well, that's very kind of you, Scott.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is another edition of the Coach Scott Field Show. My friend Roland Lazenby, I'm going to stay in touch with you, and
Please
thank you
do.
once
I look
again.
forward to it. And I'll make sure you get a copy of the magic book.
You know what? I'm going to read that thing, and it's going to be sitting right here on my shelf for everybody to see for
It's going to
future
be
shows.
like
With
Jordan, a 700 pager. So buckle your chin strap.
ooh, we so that see, I like that because I can really get lost in that literature there.
I hope so.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, God bless you, my friend.
You
Let's stay in
too.
touch. And
Same to you.
ladies and gentlemen, hey, we've got another couple great guests. Hey, Roland, I've got Kenny Anderson coming on, and I'm going to have Charles Oakley coming on here in
Well,
the near future.
you give both of those guys all the props they deserve because they're great.
Oh, I think they're going to be wonderful, but they got big shoes to fill from tonight.
Well, I don't know about that.
There you go. Well, thank you, Roland. I appreciate
See
you.
ya. Bye now.